At today's Power of Words podcast, we have Sarah Gilman. This episode is a heartfelt exploration of the struggles many face but often feel too isolated to voice. She emphasizes, "More silent we are, the lonelier we are." This powerful quote encapsulates the essence of today's discussion, highlighting the need for open conversation about mental health to foster connection and healing. Join us as we uncover the transformative power of vulnerability and the impact of emotional expression on the overall well-being. Well, hello everybody, and welcome back to the Power of Words podcast on Wellness Wednesday. I am so happy to have here with me today Sarah Gilman. Sarah, welcome to the studio, to Studio Place in Brentwood, and Andy and Studio Place team, thank you for having us and supporting what we do, which is sharing stories and sharing vulnerabilities so we can help someone else, and more importantly, so you know that you are not alone. Hi, Sarah, and welcome. So happy to have you here.
I'm so happy to be here.
Well, we were just meant to be in a meeting together, and I was traveling and wasn't able to make it. But let's start with introducing yourself. I know you're an actress, and you're also the voice of Didi Hirsch for the Next Gen community. And let's talk a little bit about you, what you do, what do you love doing, and let's talk about your career a little bit.
I feel like the answer changes all the time. I'm still figuring it out, but I'm an actress. I've been acting since I was 12 years old, but I'm also a self-identified book nerd. So I love reading and I love school. I love anything that has to do with human behavior, and I think that's what drew me to acting, but what also really helped me in my own mental health journey, because once I started reading about neuroscience and psychology and to a degree like philosophy, it helped me put words to what I was feeling and potentially why I was feeling that way and how to better design my environment to help me cope in healthier ways. So this is all to say I'm an actress right now. That's the job on the resume, but I also am I'm a board advisor for Didi Hirsch, which is how we met, and I'm a board advisor in that capacity because I'm the chair of the Next Gen Advisory Council there, which is more geared towards incorporating the voices of youth and addressing the youth mental health crisis.
Well, fabulous. And what a fabulous job you're doing. And thank you for all the efforts you make, sharing your stories and telling us what made you come to Didi Hirsch and decide to take on this role.
Yeah, it's, I started thinking about suicide when I was 11 years old, and I started self-harming around that time as well. In the absence of having open conversations about mental health and how to cope, and kind of also just normalizing the fact that I was feeling these things and feeling them so strongly. So I've been dealing with that for many, many years. And in college, I actually was in a period of crisis and saw the Didi Hirsch Suicide Prevention Center sign when I was driving on my way to carry out a plan. And at that time, I didn't know it was Didi Hirsch. I didn't know about the organization. I just kind of saw the sign and I was like, oh, that's a reason to stay. The fact that there's this giant sign that says Suicide Prevention Center means there are other people who are going through this experience as well, and I'm not alone. And later, during the pandemic, a few years later, I was really, really struggling. I was going through my first breakup, my first relationship and my first breakup, all in the confines of the pandemic, and was feeling very, very hopeless and isolated. I didn't know who I was. I struggled with the lack of control and lack of linearity that is so prevalent in acting careers and Hollywood creative careers generally. And I really needed something to hold on to. And I looked back and I found that picture of the sign that I had taken that night, and I saw the Didi Hirsch logo, and I was like, well, who are they? They played such a big part of my story. Who is running this center? And I ended up reaching out to them on social media because I have a bit of a platform that I created during my Disney Channel days. And I reached out to them and I was like, listen, I'm not an expert in this, but this means something to me and I would love to share these resources if you have anything that I can share or, bring into a bit more light. And we started collaborating that way. And I spoke at their annual event that year called Alive Together. It's my favorite. There's another one this year if you're in Los Angeles.
Yes. For those in LA, yes.
It's so impactful because it's one of the only events I know of that brings together survivors of attempts and survivors of suicide loss. And it's not two communities that you would normally think to put together because of the potential emotionality that comes from that. But it's such a beautiful and it's a bittersweet, but it's a hopeful event. And so I ended up speaking there and just from that experience trying to figure out how to stay involved and get involved. And that's when he started conversations at that time about what if we started a council or pipeline for young people who want to be involved and want to share their stories but don't know how or haven't operated in the nonprofit world before. And that's kind of how the Next Gen Council was started.
Wow, that's amazing. I want to backtrack a little bit. Well, we were at the most recent Didi Hirsch event, and before that, the third place, when our third place opened up. It was so beautiful to see all this advancement that Didi Hirsch is making in the communities on the West Coast and even nationally, I think. I'd like to, just to help kids that are out there that have these thoughts. When you were 11 and you were starting to get these thoughts, do you remember what actually might have triggered it? Was there a trigger for you to be at 11 years old? I mean, people will say, what problems do you have? You have a roof over your head, you have food on your table.
Yeah.
That's the normal response.
Oh, 100%. And to a degree, that's the response I was telling myself in my head. I knew on the one hand that I was really struggling because I felt very isolated. I was absolutely unpopular in middle school and high school. And so I was feeling very isolated. I felt misunderstood. I felt like nobody liked me and that I didn't have any strong relationships. Of course, maybe not in that succinct of a phrasing, but I felt very alone. I felt weird. I felt judged, but on the other hand, and all of that I think led to me feeling hopeless. I didn't feel like there was a spot for me somewhere in the future, or that I was resilient enough to carve one out. And then on the other hand, I was aware. I was I'm going to a great school. My parents are both working, but I have a way to get to and from school. I have food on the table. I can play, I play sports. I'm healthy. I didn't feel like I was entitled to the level of sadness and depression that I was feeling. And so we talk a lot about stigma, and there absolutely is stigma. Yes. I think we see the levels of it going down in this current generation, but there's a different level of stigma. There's self-stigma, and there's also the perception of stigma. And so what they found when they've done recent research on it is that the actual levels of stigma are going down. So the amount that you are judging me is decreasing, but the levels of perceived stigma are increasing. So you may be judging me less, but I perceive that you're judging me more. Yeah. Than you really are. And at the same time, I think, especially with social media, where you're only seeing highlight reels, and it's I used to be anti-social media, but it's not going anywhere. It's part of the social fabric nowadays. But at that point, you are only seeing someone's highlight reel, and without remembering that and being conscious of that, it's very easy to silo yourself and convince yourself I'm the only one struggling or having a hard time. And then you have that self-stigma that's bubbling up of you're the only one going through this, so you can't share it because, you're the only one that's struggling. And that's one of, I think, the ultimate paradoxes of wellness is we end up being the most silent about the things that hurt the most. And the more silent we are, the lonelier we are. If we gave voice to it, there'd be a lot of connection.
That's where I think I came from when I realized what was going on, and, wanting to normalize the way kids express themselves, starting with kids. I think we all have a problem. Mm-hmm. We talk about everything on the surface, but we're really not going into into how we feel personally. So do you think if you had a chance to express yourself as a habit on a daily basis, your 11-year-old self might not have gone down that path?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think that there would have been such a higher chance that I didn't. I think in the absence of a healthy way to express myself, I turned to a very unhealthy and destructive way. And I started self-harming when I was in 8th grade. And to kind of put a loose definition behind it, like self-harming or non-suicidal self-injury, that's what it's called when you look at the research text, is like the destruction of one's body without the intent to take one's life. And so at that time, I didn't want to die. I wanted to punish myself for what I perceived to be my own lacks and the reason that I was having such a hard time in social environments, because I didn't know how to put that into words. And to a degree, I mean, of course, looking back, it wasn't the way I wish I'd learned to, but for many years, it was how I attempted to ask for help and signal to someone that I needed help and I wasn't doing okay. Because so many of the books and movies that you read, which you don't, or movies that you watch, which you don't, I'm going to say that one more time. So much of the media we consume, which we don't always remember informs our worldviews more than almost anything else, is centered around the idea of loving as fixing. Like, I can't be loved unless I need to be fixed. Like, I need to be hurt in order to be saved. And so my perception there was like, what's the use of saving yourself? What I want more than anything is to feel loved and feel connected and feel, strong in my relationship with family and friends and, romantic others. And so to do that, I need to not be okay, to give them a platform to save me on. And so for me, I was going to start hurting myself and doing it in such a way that, like, if someone was paying attention, they would see it and they would take care of me. And of course, that's never how it turned out. But by then, that just became my coping mechanism. I think if I had found a different way to express those emotions and express that I was feeling isolated and that I was feeling hopeless, research has found that even the mere expression of emotions helps to alleviate them. It helps with the management of them. I think just getting it out of your head, getting it out of your body is insanely useful. And this has been proven. And so even just being able to find words or draw it out, or if I didn't have words, or do something with it to get it out of my mind, I definitely think that, I mean, who's to say? We don't know. But I definitely think that would have made a substantial difference.
And I think going forward, that's what we're using. We're using emotional intelligence and starting it at a really early age. So expressing your emotions is normal. And then when this isolation happens at the age of 11, somebody recognizes that you need help. Because I think the first way kids start to do it is you start moving away from your friend circle into maybe a different friend circle, or just not be present with a lot that's going on. So, everything we can do to prevention's better than cure. So that's 100%. What we're looking to do to help that not happen. When you talk about self-harming, I'm curious, is substance one of those ways, or is it just do you think substance is also, I don't know if that was a part of your journey, but do you think substance abuse is the same? People are feeling the same way, and that is why they turn to substance? Might that be one way of saying I need attention, or is it just wanting to get lost because you don't feel worthy?
I think, to preface everything I'm about to say, it's all speculative because I haven't done a ton of reading in substance abuse, and I don't have as much lived experience in that area.
I just wondered maybe if it was just self-harming, or was it also substance, because that's self-harming.
No, 100%. I can speak from my own perspective, and I think for me, I started, I did start drinking when I got into college. I waited until I was 21. I'm not just saying that because this is a podcast. I actually did. and I think what I found is at that time, because I hadn't addressed any of the underlying things I was struggling with, I just almost changed the environment. But I'm a big believer in wherever you go, there you are. So it was still me, and it was still the same things I was struggling with, but all of a sudden I added alcohol on top of that as a way. I think for me, honestly, though, it was less self-destruction and more, I mean, I'm sure it was self-destructive, but I think for me, the goal at the time was coping. You know, it makes you, you know, forget and be less worried. And that was my perception of it at the time. Of course, one of the things we don't talk about is alcohol is a depressant. So the next day always usually ends up being worse when it comes to your anxiety or your mood. It also lowers the efficacy of antidepressants. So if you're on any sort of medication that are having a real effect and helping you, it will decrease the efficacy of those medications. And I definitely didn't know that at the time either. So, when I started drinking in college, it definitely exacerbated the situation. I don't think I was using it or viewing it in the same light that I saw. It was more of a mode of escapism.
Okay.
One that I did not help me in the long term, but was the one I was using at the time. Can I say something really quickly?
Yes.
To your earlier point about quickly about expression. I think like one of the reasons I love the band so much, and if I'm jumping the gun, let me tell.
No, that's
just let me
fine.
know. But I think sometimes we get so caught up in like, if I don't know the right thing to say or the right way to express myself, then I don't want to do it at all. Like I'm definitely a perfectionist. And so sometimes when we don't know what to say, we don't say anything. And in interpersonal and intrapersonal relations, I think that's the worst thing you can do. Even though it's hard to say something and fear when the stakes are high, like when it comes to your own well-being or someone else's well-being, like you fear that saying the wrong thing will have a negative effect. But a lot of times silence is even worse. Yeah. What I really like is, you know, there are so many different models for this is how you identify your feelings. Like use the feelings chart or use, you know, colors or drawing or so on and so forth. And I think one of the points to hammer in on is there is no right or wrong way. There's just like learning a method and see what works for you and like see what connects with you, and also use it as a jumping off point because it's still the beginning of a journey. And one of the things I loved about the bands, I mean, today I'm wearing Magic because I felt like I needed to remember potentially the effect that I can bring to the world, or hopefully like positives I have for myself. Thank you. And then also compassion and empathy because I was running late and I'm all tired and just a little frazzled these days. And so I liked your reminder that these are for myself, and I definitely am not so self-compassionate sometimes, but it's also a signaling for, hey, this is what I need right now. This is all to say, I love this method because like expression is one of the first, like identification is one of the first steps.
Awareness.
To expressing it and coping with it. It's easier. I'm not going to say it's not easier. Like it's easier sometimes to just feel bad and want to throw a blanket over that and not address it and not make eye contact with it. But what I've learned in my own journey, at least, is that when you do that, it doesn't just go away. It just shows up in a different way, usually one that's not helpful for you. Like for me, back to your earlier question about why potentially I was learning to feel these things, I think I grew up and I taught myself that it wasn't safe for me to have needs or demands. And so I didn't feel safe expressing anger or expressing like wants or unhappiness because I felt like I wasn't good enough to ask for those things. And when you suppress all your anger, it doesn't just disappear. It usually turns inward. And I think that is one of the biggest reasons I turned towards self-destructive coping mechanisms, because all the anger or unhappiness or sadness and fear that I wasn't expressing was just bouncing back.
Yeah, it lives inside of you and it starts to grow. It's like this, an invisible cancer, right? That's growing inside of you.
Yeah.
That no one can see and you don't feel, and you feel like there's no cure for that
Yeah.
because no one sees it. Of all the work you're doing right now, what part of it makes you most happy? What puts you in a good place? Because I believe through helping others, you're healing in so many ways. And do you feel that? Do you? There's a couple of questions that I want to ask because I want to go back as well to medication and things like that. But you're beautiful, you're stable, you show up, you spearhead this amazing council for Didi Hirsch. What path are you taking that makes you most happy now, outside of just work, in the work you're doing to help others, outside of your career work? I mean,
Yeah.
as an actress.
Yeah. It's such an interesting question because I've been thinking about it a lot in my own life. I think, and I'm going to guess this is relatable, that sometimes the things that bring me the most joy are not the things that are going to help me survive. And I mean mostly like paying rent and buying food and stuff. And so it's hard. I find it difficult because the things that bring me the most joy, like without fail, are one, like I love being on set. Like when I don't love auditioning, but when I'm on set, like working with people to try and tell a story, like that to me feels powerful.
That's
I
your
love
happy place.
Yeah, like I love the connection that comes from it. But on an equal note, I love like things like this, like meetings with you where we get to talk over these ideas and the projects you're working on, and like, oh, maybe you could do this, or I love this and this is how it resonates. Yeah. I love the board meetings at Didi Hirsch and the meetings, and I love the events where I get to meet people and talk with them, and there's so much vulnerability but safety. I love anything where I'm connecting with another human being. What's difficult, of course, is like part of being an adult is weathering the parts that are like emailing and Zoom meetings behind the scenes to get to those in-between moments. 100%. So I think, but I'm also a little anxious worrywart. Like I'm usually just overthinking 100 different ways of like, is this how I should be best spending my time? And am I being productive enough? And have I been sitting too long? And is this going to increase my risk of a heart attack in 50 years? Like my brain's always just spinning a little too much out of control, probably. But that's part of what makes me me. It's like, I found it's helpful to visualize it. And so they're like little bouncy balls in my head. And sometimes when I'm calm, they're just kind of like pitter-pattering around. And then when I'm too anxious, they're blah, 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 blah. And like when I'm a good level of tuned in, you know, like the Lizzie McGuire theme song where she's the like bouncing with the balls. That's trifecta. That's what we're always going for. Anyway, so yeah, things where I get to connect with other human beings make me the happiest. I'm still struggling to figure out at present how to make that something that supports me in a way that contributes to like meeting
your life as well as your happiness.
100%.
And I think that's very difficult for a lot of young people, is how do I find that place? And that's so important, to find a career that makes you happy, like you're in your happy place and you can work for 16 and 18 hours and still be excited when you wake up the next morning. And I feel like I'm there. So when I talk about finding your magic, that is what it means, is to find that inside you. Because when you find your purpose, you're unstoppable. And I think I've said this like a million times. And we can just go through life not looking for our purpose, because not looking for our magic, because we don't even realize what we bring to the world, what we have inside of us. And I often say our Creator puts us on this planet with our magic. So once you find it, that becomes your purpose, and then you know what you're here for.
I 100% agree. I think, though, that I would add a caveat that oftentimes, and it's totally okay, your purpose or your passion is not your career, which I think is okay.
It's not. Yes.
It's like, but like I talk to so many people, and I've struggled with it too, of like, not even like having trouble even identifying what my passion is. I feel like I constantly say this with my sister because we're going back and forth. I'm like, I wish my brain was like a little fax machine that could just like print out like you're feeling this way right now, and you know you're passionate about this, and this is what would make you feel like high purpose right now. But it's not. Like, it's hard to sit down with yourself. It's worth it because your brain is going to be your roommate for the rest of your life. But it's difficult to sit down and just try and like navigate the labyrinth of your mind and figure out what your purpose is or where it stems from, and that it could change. I've heard a good tip for that, which helped me, is thinking back to what made you the happiest as a child, because that's when you had your kind of like raw clay before it had been molded by these ideas of like, this is what you should do to be able to support yourself or your family or yada yada yada. And so I sat down one day, like made myself a cup of coffee, and I just sat there and was thinking about like, what did I enjoy doing as a kid? Mm-hmm. And it was like playing pretend, telling jokes, making people laugh, talking with people. And so from there, you can have the causes that are important to you and your passions be different things, but use your passion to support the causes that are important to you.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So agree with everything you said, just add in a caveat, because I think when I was younger and I heard, like, just find your purpose, it almost made me more stressed because I was like, oh, shoot, am I the only person who doesn't know inherently, intrinsically what I like? But I feel so many people, especially now that the future is so wide open and there's so many paths that you can take and there's so many possibilities, it's like decision fatigue. It's almost more difficult.
Yes, and I agree with you, and I like that you said that, because I want to say that you don't find you can't, you know, it's not like sitting down and saying, okay, this is it. But there are things that you find that you really love doing, and that's a reminder. And then that builds up. And when you find you love it, and then you love it more, and then you start to go in that direction. Because yes, we're all raised to believe, you know, you have to, we give you a good education, and this is what parents say, right? I give you a good education, not for me, but because I want you to go out and support yourself and do well. So some kids feel that is a pressure. Some kids feel like, okay, they have to live up to their expectations, and other kids just sail with it and just move forward. But along the way there, it's taking a moment to say, okay, I really love doing this, or I don't like doing this, and so I'm not going to go down the path where I don't like doing something.
And to your point, you have to try to know. Like, I'm the queen of not wanting to do anything if I think there's a chance that I'll fail. Because I'm scared of failure, even though I remind myself like failure is the best way to learn.
Absolutely.
You learn much more from failure than you do from success. But like, I'm the queen of sitting there being like, I'll think my way into success or into like, and no, you just gotta go do the thing, and then you'll learn. Maybe you won't like it. Okay, cool.
At least try.
100%, 99% of decisions are reversible.
I know that you love connecting with people, and there's no better opportunity to connect with people than sitting here and talking about, you know, your vulnerabilities. What is it? What is a message you'd like to give to, you know, youth or adults that are listening to you today, to let them know that they're not alone?
I think the biggest thing I wish I'd heard and still wish I hear more is that you're not a problem to be fixed. We have a bit of an obsession with solution-oriented mindsets here in like Western culture that really frame like negative emotions or stresses or mental health or mental illness as something that you have to fix, and then you'll be better and you'll be normal and you'll be okay again. But the fact of the matter is it's completely healthy and normal and good to feel negative emotions. It's just about feeling them in the scope of what you're reacting to and in the situation. So of course, we don't want anyone feeling like hopeless and like they don't have a place in the future. But it's okay every now and then. It's okay to feel discouraged if you don't get something you want, or if you lose, or a friendship ends, or a relationship ends. It's natural and it's normal to feel sad and to feel angry and disgusted and afraid and anxious. And also, just because you feel anxious or sad doesn't mean it needs to be pathologized and diagnosed as something. But I think when you set up this idea that anything negative is just something that needs to be fixed into a positive, and then you go on your way, you get so caught off guard the next time you feel a negative emotion. And I did this a lot with myself. Like, once I'm better, I'll be completely better. And then I would spiral the second that I felt discouraged or anxious or depressed again, and think like, this is going to be the rest of my life, just trying to be better and never being better. When in the truth of the matter, it's just being human. Like, you're going to have happy days. You're going to have sad days. You might have sad weeks. You might be in the middle of a really hard time in your life where you're taking it minute by minute. But it makes sense because it's a hard time in your life. Like, the world is really difficult right now. You shouldn't be numb to that. Like, you shouldn't feel great all the time, probably. I mean, I don't want to say should. Should is not the right word here. But the point is, like, you're not a problem to be fixed. You're a complex and beautiful and imperfect human being, as we all are.
Perfect.
Yeah. And I've also found that always, for me, vulnerability begets vulnerability. When you show someone, you know, who you are, in my experience, people are eager to show you who they are too, ideally in the best way.
Thank you for that. It's so powerful. I'd just like to say that you are perfect. We have imperfections, but as a human being, you are perfect. You're exactly as you were meant to be. Yeah. And then it's finding the right community that understands you and accepts you. And I think, like, we can accept someone that has COVID, someone that has the flu, someone that has cancer, whatever, we're able to accept all kinds of other diseases that go on, all kinds of other illnesses or disabilities. And this is just the part of personality, and this is something that individuals that have mental illness have. And there is help. So you're able to reach out for help. Some people need medication, some people need therapy, some people just need to express themselves. So I want to say thank you for being here and expressing yourself and using the power of your words to empower others. And I so love you for the work you're doing. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Thank you all for listening in.